Hi everybody, it's good to see you. I hope you're well. Won't you pull you up a chair and set a spell while I share the story of Granny Mountain and her story during the Civil War. This story is told by Dink Messon in the mountains of Georgia on the Peach Mountains as he heard it way back in 1948. Before we get into the story, let's get a little history on old Granny Mountain. Her parents were settlers from the Carolinas that moved to the mountains of Georgia to farm in the early 1800s. They moved to Peach Mountain, where Granny was born in 1859, just 2 short years before the war broke out. Her daddy had to go fight in the war, never coming home. Later, Mary married and ended up moving down in the valley below the Peach Mountain, where she raised a family. Her kids grew up and moved away, and Granny's husband passed on. Now this is where the story begins. Well, hey folks, my name is Dink Messon, and I want to share a story that Granny told me years ago. See, I was born in the summer of 1938, 10 years ago to be exact. Seeing that I'm 10 now, Mama lets me go off by myself and do things for her. The most important one is every Wednesday morning I travel down Peach Mountain to the valley to see about old Granny Mountain. She was my grandma's best friend. Granny Mountain was getting along about 89 years old and needed a hand with heavy lifting, shopping, and them kind of things, you know. I get up early enough to do my chores and then be on my way, walking down that old mountain trail to the grassy hills down below. Soon enough, coming over the hill, the chimney of old Granny Mountain's cabin would come into view. I'd go to the porch, knock on the door. Slowly but surely, she opens it and sees me in. We sat and talked a spell, but this day was different. She seemed distant. Something was really bothering her. It's bothering her something awful. I said, "Granny, you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a pondering on an old memory." She looked at me and said, "You don't like stories, do you?" And I said, "Well, I sure do." Well, she give me one of them good old tea cakes she makes, a cup of coffee, and said, "Sit and listen. I got one that'll cheer you gizzard, boy." She started. Way back, a long time ago, when I was just a small girl, barely able to remember, there were rumors of war coming across the land. One day, men came to the farm and made Dad go with them to fight in the war. Last I saw him, he was riding off in the sunset on his old horse. Me and Mama was just crying, wanting him to stay. Just like that, he was gone. A few years later, the war came to us. September 18, 1863, started the second bloodiest battle of the Civil War. 34,000 died fighting. Them cannons blasted so loud I could hear them out here in the mountains. That night I fell asleep to the sound of cannon fire and the sight of an orange glow coming over the hills and the smell of smoke. And I woke up to the same sound. Smoke filled the air. And all of us in these old hills were scared that the war would come to us next. But by the 20th, it was all over. The soldiers left Chikamawga. Chikamawga was in shambles, a disaster zone. Only being 4-year-old, I didn't understand, but I was sure glad it was over. Well, as I sat there and listened to Granny, it didn't dawn on me what day it was. It just so happened to be September 20th, 1948. I couldn't imagine going through an ordeal like that. And I never forgot that story Granny Mountain shared. It stuck with me for years to come. Folks, I want to thank you for sitting and listening to me today. Share this old story of Granny Mountain. Her living through the Battle of Chikamawga. And how scared it was. How her and her family and all them mountain folks was just hoping and praying that wasn't coming for them next. We thank you for listening. We love you to pieces. And we'll see you next time.